Hello and welcome to today's show on Clash of the Competing Realities. For our first topic, in one corner we have Amber Heard and her claim to have been severely physically, sexually, emotionally abused by Johnny Depp. And in the other corner we have Johnny Depp, who has quite a lot of audio recordings and witnesses to say that there's no physical evidence of injuries to Amber Heard and that she, in fact, abused him, and that there's significant evidence to say he was admitted to hospital after having his fingertips severed by a glass bottle violently thrown at him by Amber Heard. Now, it's hard to be a card-carrying, self-credentialed feminist and feel the opposition from some feminists who have ideologically imposed fact blindness to what's been happening with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. I myself automatically believed Amber Heard when she first made allegations in 2016. I was sad about it because I respect Johnny Depp's body of work. And I think I like Sleepy Hollow. That's a movie I like. And he was in that, and it feels sad and tarnished to have a movie you like have an actor who's abusive towards a woman and who is accused of partaking so heavily in patriarchal dominance culture that they would physically strike a woman or abuse a woman in any way. Sort of a might is right culture. Yay, Bob, I can see your comment and I'm so pleased. So this beginning bit is for the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial fans, and I'm really encouraging people to get on board with this because it's epic. I've been interested in and talking about this case for 2 years now, and it's a cultural touchstone for our time. So people form an opinion about it without necessarily deeply engaging with some of these competing alleged realities. And you want to be informed on this issue because, as I just said, cultural touchstone for our moment. Remember the O.J. Simpson trial? This is a culturally defining moment for our era, and it defines some of the, or it perpetuates some of the dynamics of sympathy, because the argument for a lot of anti-feminist people is they're scared of relinquishing the keys to sympathy. They want sympathy for men in trials to say, oh no, don't take allegations too seriously because you could jeopardize a man's career or his athletic career. And feminists have long argued, no, you have to be willing to jeopardize a man's career if the allegations have credible evidence, if the allegations are true. You can't just throw away a woman's appetite for justice. You can't throw away the need for natural justice in order to protect a man because you feel so sympathetic towards them, because they are so relatable to you if you're a person in power. So yes, there's been a pushback against dominance ideology where physical might has helped keep people in power, and then they say, be sympathetic to me and don't accuse me of rape unless you have 3 witnesses. Oh, Paul's here as well. Hey, Paul, how's your wife doing? How's Rose? Nice to see you. So I did see a promising comment today. Someone said her husband has been a victim of domestic abuse in a previous relationship, and the trial and Johnny Depp making an effort to come forward with his version of events has been great for her husband's mental health. And I thought that's so encouraging, because I never want a justice issue to be defined by one person's bad behavior. So when anybody says, oh, Amber Heard has so damaged the cause of women coming forward with stories of abuse, I want to say, let's not accept that. If one woman lies or one woman behaves badly, or if one man behaves badly, we don't have to settle for there being some kind of collective implication. So yeah, not all men or not all women, that's fair. We instinctively are repelled by the idea of being collectively punished for somebody else's misdeeds. And I think that impulse drives a lot of resistance to some causes that cry out for justice. So we have to find ways to reassure people, hey, men, don't fear feminism, because look, we're making an effort right now. We're not going to automatically believe Amber Heard anymore. We're not going to automatically we're not going to be ideologically attached to a pattern of fact blindness, whereby we ignore the audio evidence of Amber Heard admitting to punching Johnny Depp and to chasing him into elevators if he leaves their apartment because of an escalating fight, that he responds to a Amber Heard rage by trying to get away from her, and she chases him and instigates physical violence. I've heard Amber Heard admit to that on audio, on multiple audio tapes, and yet there's still often a pattern in the media of characterizing Depp very negatively. And I don't want any part of that, so I'm happy to be here saying, hey, no, please don't lump me in with Amber Heard, and please, fellow feminists, don't balance out offering support to abused women by offering unconditional acceptance of a woman who may and is quite likely to be lying. In fact, I'm going to 100% say that woman is lying and has lots of inconsistencies in her stories and a paucity of evidence of seeking any medical help or plausible evidence of injury. In fact, I've got a picture of her injury up here. And just to reassure people, I am going to move next to the dynamics of coerced birth, that escalating autocratic push from the Republican Party to escalate depriving women of bodily autonomy as part of an evident pattern to erode the rights, the civil liberties and the personal First Amendment protections of Americans, to bodily autonomy, to being able to have a medically necessary abortion or an emotionally, a psychologically medically necessary abortion, if so required, because that's important too. We'll get to that. And coercion, I'm going to come out and say I'm on the side that says coercion is bad, whether it be from somebody lying and seeking to blackmail you into giving out a larger divorce settlement and helping you build your profile as a domestic abuse campaigner, or whether it be the Republican Party, state by state, introducing legislation to forbid women from crossing state lines and coercing women into feeding the domestic infant supply. The domestic infant supply. I was going to say supply chain. That's a very customary phrase, but no. The phrase used by a Supreme Court justice was domestic infant supply. They want more babies. And I'll also argue that want for women to have more babies, even on an involuntary basis, is part of a racist white nationalist push to reject migration, to reject balancing out the relatively low birth rate of an relatively educated population by refusing to make up that deficit with by allowing migrants into the United States and welcoming migrants. They instead want to reduce or shut down migration and force women to have more babies instead, in the hope that that will ultimately result in more white babies, or more white babies and more impoverished babies born to people of color who can slot into some kind of feudal economic system whereby poverty has locked them into a cycle of accepting whatever employment conditions exploitative corporate owners wish to impose on a vulnerable population. So they want some vulnerable babies for exploitation, and they want some white babies to keep up the white nationalist political influence of white nationalists in the United States, even if white nationalists only comprise of a third of the American voting population. They're a powerful third of the American voting population because the Senate is malapportioned. There are 2 senators for Wyoming and 2 senators for all of California, with a vast population discrepancy. I hope that makes sense. Now let me make Oh, Paul's made a comment. 7 rounds more of chemo to go. No, 7 rounds of chemo, 1 more to go. She's still hanging on with unbelievable strength. Well, yay, Rose. I'm glad that she is doing well and that she only has 1 more round of chemo to go. Thanks for sharing that with us. Oops. Okay, no, this is a picture of Amber Heard that her team wanted to show to the jury, but Johnny Depp's team objected, saying that Amber Heard's lawyers didn't submit the photo during the discovery phase of the case. This is really important and speaks to Amber Heard's credibility because her team and she herself failed to meet deadlines in November of last year for submitting her devices so that the metadata on her photos and her any submitted evidence could be examined by a forensic data expert to determine whether there had been any changes. So this photo shows Amber Heard with a cut lip, and I've had those type of cut lips if I've pulled at skin, or my daughter's also had them if we have dry lips and we've pulled at some skin on our lip, and that's induced bleeding. Now, it's hard to even pick at details because I feel this sadness to go, oh, am I undermining the confidence of women to come forward with their stories of domestic abuse if I'm criticizing Amber Heard and pulling at what I see as deficits in her credibility? And then I'm reassured to say, no, I actually think it'll give women confidence to come forwards because she is such an outlier. The degree to which it's obvious she's fabricated evidence and the degree to which it's become evident that she didn't donate the money she said she was going to, neither to the ACLU nor to the LA Children's Hospital. The degree to which her stories have changed over time in the media, to which she keeps adding additional details of assault. The domestic violence victims I've seen on social media commenting have said, that's not how I behaved, and it upsets me that she's acting like this, and I don't find her credible. And that at least assures me that when this is over, other victims will be able to say, I draw a line between her and me. She's so extraordinary in her approach to this matter. She's so extraordinary in her evident lies about donating $7 million, which she didn't. She donated $350,000 to the ACLU, and then Elon Musk made 2 further donations on her behalf, and Johnny Depp made an initial $100,000 donation himself on Amber Heard's behalf before she got upset that he was donating some of that divorce settlement directly to the charity she claimed she wanted to donate to. So he stopped and began to transfer the money directly to her. Those lies are so Lady Macbeth level out there in malicious defamation and just an effort to bring down a cultural icon to many people and elevate herself as a consequence. The ACLU has made evident that it's been a co-conspirator with Amber Heard in terms of crafting an op-ed, and they wrote the op-ed for Amber Heard and allowed her to attach her name and suggest edits to it. That was the ACLU proposed to the Washington Post and other publications for putting out there in the public arena, knowing that they would have cachet because it was implied that Johnny Depp was the abuser and that they would get additional attention to what I see as their worthy agenda at the time. They wanted to draw attention to the way in which the Trump administration was making it more difficult for refugees, claiming that they're fleeing domestic violence, and for women to get help in situations of domestic abuse. So that's all. I don't need her face up on screen anymore. Let's see. Oh, except somebody did post a couple of pictures of Amber Heard pulling at her lip, which is illustrative of one way in which you can get a highly localized red mark on your lip. It's so funny. I know the people that I typically reach with my political broadcasts, and I'm thinking they might have absolutely no interest in this case or think themselves above celebrity matters. But the truth is, this case is a cultural touchstone because so many people have taken an interest. It was always obvious to me, because I've been following it for 2 years, that this, when more details came out, was going to be such an epic tale of deceit and revenge and abusing new societal trends. The new trend of, let's make an effort to take women seriously. Let's make an effort to give more, to award more credibility towards women, to just say they've earned it. We know that women are often the targets of dominant, abusive, coercive behavior from people who are physically stronger than them and who have maybe imbibed too strongly of a patriarchal ethos of, you are subordinate to my needs, so I have the right to impose myself on you, to throw you around if you make me angry, to treat you like a subordinate to me, someone who cannot assert themselves, who cannot assert their authority. So we gave additional, or society at a collective level extended credibility to Ms. Heard. And for that to blow back shows that we have work to do to say, look, we can't automatize this process of extending credibility to people. There is always going to be a back and forth of sympathy, depending on whichever narrative lives more strongly in our individual heads at any given time. Which story do we remember most? We remember some woman giving false testimony against a man, or do we remember seeing more cases of men who have taken the lives of their partners, men who may have deprived a woman of financial autonomy, and do we accept that men are also victims of domestic abuse and the same kind of psychological undermining of self-confidence, that type of abuse? Because you don't have to have physical strength to psychologically undermine someone. Bob is reporting on an awful conversation he heard between a Russian woman and a man, which included a lot of evidence of pathological disdain and hatred towards Ukrainians and Ukrainian children very specifically. So that is very sad to read, and I'm very sorry about that. But it also ties in with our theme today of competing realities, that Russia has tried to advance a narrative of Ukrainians and Nazis, so they were invading to liberate most of Ukraine from a dominant Nazi element in their government. It became evident that, nope, Ukrainians didn't want to be liberated, and that their Jewish president had strong claim to not being a Nazi in any way, shape, or form. A Jewish president, Volodymyr Zelensky, whose father lost 3 brothers to the Nazis in the Holocaust. So Volodymyr Zelensky lost 3 uncles before he was even born. And that those tragedies have been so thoroughly disrespected by the Russian government, by the Russian army, in their drive to assert imperialist dominance over Ukraine, their neighbor. They have committed so many atrocities, war crime atrocities. It's a crime to have initiated a war against Ukraine. It's a war crime in itself to have invaded Ukraine for no reason other than a fabricated narrative of, oh, well, there's some Nazis. Oh, well, NATO's looking at us funny. I think I once in a broadcast went through a whole chain of Russian media justifications and fabrications about why they were launching a war and why they were conducting a war, why they were being aggressive, militaristically aggressive to their neighbor. And everybody's heard stories now of atrocities committed by the Russian army, of, I don't even want to go into them, but I will try and skim lightly. Women fleeing areas who've been stopped, sexually assaulted and then had their bodies burnt atop a pile of burning tires, to say nothing of children assaulted in front of their parents. Really gut-wrenching, horrific stories of abuse and assault that constitute war in one of its basest manifestations, the desire to inflict emotional trauma on people, to compound the physical trauma being inflicted more generally on their infrastructure, and physically the loss of lives. So to just emotionally grind people into the dirt by sexually assaulting women, children, and anyone. Bob says a lot of Russians are getting a VPN, so more and more are getting the truth. That's to be hoped. From what I saw, there was still a relatively high level of disinformation that Russians had an appetite for, because they have been fed a nationalistic style narrative of cultural superiority to Ukrainians for a long time, and that they have a famous poet called Pushkin who just wrote disparagingly of Ukrainians and Ukrainian national sentiment. And when you realize how deep-rooted that must be, that can help you understand why there might be these taped calls between Russian fighters or between Russian and their family members back home, that provides evidence of a really pathologically abusive view of Ukrainians on the part of Russians, that they are so violent in their thinking towards Ukrainians. And that explains some of the support, as well as just saying, yes, this is a Putin-initiated despotic move by a tyrant. A tyrant who has tried to claim that Ukraine is decadent because it embraces LGBTQ rights. It embraces the humanity of gay people and is more allied with modern Western values, which are more inclusive and accepting of variations of sexual preference and variations of gender presentation. Steve Bannon echoes a lot of the Putin propaganda in terms of not only negatively characterizing LGBTQ people as anti-Christian religion and destined for hell, but also framing them as a threat to people's children in order to try and heighten antagonism from the political middle towards people who are gender diverse and sexuality diverse, by saying that they're groomers and that they're pedophiles. And that's an argument with some potency in the political right of the United States, because there's been a lot of book bannings of books in Florida. You can see particularly the Don't Say Gay law. That's its colloquial name, but Floridian Governor Ron DeSantis and his supporters often deceptively say it just applies to kindergarten and through to first, second, or third grade, but that's not the case. The grades aren't specified, so teachers of any school year can feel concerned that they might be fired, or that the tip lines might be used to report on them if they, at any level of public education, mention, say, part of the homosexual history of the United States. The homosexual history of the United States sounds funny. I'll say history relevant to acquiring rights and human rights and citizenship rights for people of homosexual inclination, the Stonewall riots, etc. Part of American history, and that's part of a general push to manipulate political sentiment by restricting history, making more conservative people feel powerful and protected from the idea that their children might despise them, that their children might learn more history than they themselves learned, and so say, hey, how did you tolerate this type of racism? How did you tolerate this type of discrimination? Look, everybody's on their own journey, but you shouldn't protect yourself from feeling that your children might despise you. It's part of life. I'm a parent of 2 children. Sometimes my children are like, what are you doing, mummy? And I just have to cope with that and say, you know what, I can learn from you as well as you learning from me. I accept the bidirectional nature of human interactions and growth. We can learn and grow, whether it's you inspiring me or me inspiring you. And that's part of the Republican attack on public education, is to provide a bulwark of parental authority and prevent that authority from being challenged by children learning more things and learning more accurate history than their parents were able to learn in school. So preventing progress and preventing improvement to protect white people's feelings. And it is white people behind this collective push for Republicans to control public school curricula and to control books available to children in the library. And it's a way of muddying the waters to be so aggressive on the attack that even bystanders who don't have that much of a vested interest, say white people, who might not feel personally attacked because Black history has become more contentious, or the teaching of Black history has become more contentious in American schools, or the teaching of accurate history involving race relations becomes more contentious. White people might go, I've got no skin in the game. I don't feel great about this, but I don't feel as passionately about this as a racist white nationalist who's adamant that no teacher should expose my children to learning about Harriet Tubman or learning about the nature of systemic racism in American culture and institutions, because that might challenge the ideology of American exceptionalism and American perfection. Because well-adapted adults, psychologically well-functioning adults, can accept imperfection. In fact, there's some kind of quadrant that's, I think, often used for writing purposes, where you get a character and you divide their personality into a quadrant. There's parts of themselves that they know, parts of themselves that other people can see, and these elements can be variously developed or undeveloped. And in the case of a lot of conservative Republicans, their shadow side is under-acknowledged, and that strengthens their motivation to cover things up, cover up history. Yes, but on the other side of it, I do want to acknowledge that I think there is an element of social contagion to sexual diversity, to children looking around them and saying, maybe I'd like to be transgender, or maybe I'd like to be homosexual. I don't think it's all genetically based. We're going into opinion territory here. I'm not particularly factually supported in my assertions, but I want to say that from my own experience, if you don't want to have children because you're concerned that there's an existential threat to humanity and your children might be brought into a world of increasingly frequent and increasingly severe disasters, catastrophic climate amplified disasters, you might go, it's easier for me to be trans. I'm a girl, but it would be easier to be a boy and take hormones to preclude my own fertility. And in a world where I might not be able to get an abortion, shutting down that female element of myself could become vastly more attractive. And people doing it around you is a pathway to illustrating the possibilities of those choices, to say, yep, I have become phobic of my own potential future fertility, so I would rather strengthen my internal drive to present as a boy and not as a female in this environment. And I don't even blame children for doing that. I don't want to challenge the authenticity of people's convictions that they're born in the wrong body, except that clearly I have just done that. I'm a little bit challenging the authenticity of people who think they're born in their own body. I think it can also be a function of a sensitive nature of someone who has a drive to avoid bringing a child into the world. in an environment where female bodily autonomy is restricted, and also there is a big question mark on the viability of human existence going forward. Yes, and that's a very human response to want to shut down your own fertility. And so there has been increasing numbers of children with depression, and also increasing numbers of children who, girls particularly, pursuing the trans route to want to become trans boys and thereby future trans men. So content warning for that, if you are yourself trans and considering what to do going forwards, what I just said might not support your assumptions that it's entirely innate and medically instigated from a position of just being born into the wrong body. I'm challenging those convictions, but still it's just my opinion that I'm volunteering here. Yes. You don't mean Mnuchin, I think, Bob, you mean not Steve Mnuchin, you mean Joe Manchin, who has today said that if they were just voting to codify Roe v. Wade, he would vote yes, but not on the Women Protection Act that's up for a vote today because he thinks it goes too far. Joe Manchin is a senator from a very red state, West Virginia, that voted in a majority sense for Donald Trump. He can play to a red audience very well because he shares a lot of those very conservative convictions. And look, he is useful as a body count to get to a Senate majority for Democrats, but they don't really have a functional Senate majority in the full sense of the word. They can propose legislation, but the Build Back Better bill didn't get passed, specifically because of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who are two sellout Dems. They're a subset of Dems, a small subset, 50 senators, 2 of whom are sellouts, who have been demonstrated to be backed by Koch money from Charles Koch, who is a white nationalist Christian billionaire who's essentially propelled by racism and wealth acquisition in a way that's actively hostile to civil rights and to First Amendment rights and the free practice of religion. Look, as a Jewish person in the United States, for the free exercise of my religion, I should be able to legally access abortion because it's a Jewish law that you prioritize pre-existing life. You prioritize the life of the woman, and if that life is in any way in jeopardy through from obvious medical causes or even from psychological and emotional causes, then absolutely an abortion is Jewish law, that one should be available. So the proposed idea that Mitch McConnell has said if Republicans regained control of the Senate and the White House, then a national abortion ban would possibly be up. I have no doubt that that's what he would do if the Republicans do gain a majority in the Senate, and if they regain the White House. And I think Americans should be prepared for that and resolved to counteract that possibility, to preclude that possibility by electing more Democrats in the Senate, by turning out, by being advocates for, voting for Democrats at all levels of government, because the Republican agenda is actively hostile to the individual autonomy and privacy of Americans. It's hostile. It has the intention of winding back gay marriage. It has the intention of winding back access to contraception. And to pull back further, it has the unspoken agenda of increasing the domestic supply of white infants, and increasing the number of the domestic supply of any color infants for adoption, because of course a lot of white Christian nationalists who want to adopt want a baby to save a soul for Christianity, and they have the belief that they can bring up a child with black skin and teach them to be a a token spokesperson for a Republican, for white nationalist Christian ethos, to say that racism is no longer significant, that people who adopt Black children can't possibly be racist because, look, they don't want to bring harm, they want to help a child of dark skin that they're adopting, when really it is quite mentally abusive to a Black child to bring them up without helping them anchor their identity in a positive concept of what being Black is, and and anchoring their identity in an understanding of what Black people have endured in the United States and what they continue to endure. So if you marinate your child's brain in disinformation, then yes, you can raise an adopted Black child who will endorse every part of the Republican platform, including lying about Democrats, lying about why women might need to access a late-stage abortion. Late-stage abortion isn't even a medical term, so I shouldn't use it. And a later stage abortion, so abortion in second or third trimester, in which there are a lot of extremely valid medical reasons that a woman might want to discontinue a pregnancy, or might need to discontinue a pregnancy in order to preserve her own life and to preserve her own ability to fulfill her obligations to pre-existing children, or to even fulfill an obligation to her own aspirations of having a family in the future. Because some pregnancies, if you continue with them, can sabotage your ability to have any future children. Bob said he's offering the ban to try and placate his base, looking for votes because he knows that 70% support Roe v. Wade, and he hopes the base believes him. Yes, Manchin likes to play both sides of the fence, but one foot is very heavily in a conservative camp of pandering to the lie that women use abortion as a form of contraception. So it's primarily the case that women who have abortions are pre-existing mothers. They already have children, and they are trying to limit their family size for personal reasons, whether it be a physical personal reason that their body can't personally endure any more pregnancies, whether they've been given that medical advice, or whether they just understand it of themselves that pregnancy can be very physically and emotionally depleting. I've had 2 babies. Some people are sick for 9 months of their pregnancy, the entire 9 months. Some people vomit constantly. Even 1 or 2 trimesters of being nauseous, constantly nauseous, is very debilitating and difficult to sustain employment, difficult to continue with educational studies while that's going on in your body. It's a big process, and it's often under discussed how draining and how debilitating pregnancy can be. So I undertook pregnancy on 2 occasions on a purely voluntary basis, and even then it was still difficult to try to comply with all of the things that it's recommended you do or refrain from doing as a pregnant person. So I found it hard for 9 months, whilst battling nausea, whilst trying to complete a master's degree, to not eat my favorite cheeses, soft cheeses, and to not eat a salad if it's out because you don't know if somebody's washed the lettuce properly. And I very occasionally ordered a weak coffee, and I would get pushback from people when I ordered a weak mocha because they would worry that I was inflicting too much caffeine on my unborn baby. And I was like, doctors say you can have 1 coffee a day, and I'm ordering a weak one. This is like, I have 1 coffee a week. So you deal with efforts to shame you. And that's when I wanted to have the baby. So imagine a woman who is not voluntarily going through that process. Imagine a woman who is being coerced by the laws of her state and precluded from leaving the state because some Republican legislators are pushing forward with legislation to ban pregnant women from crossing state lines for the purpose of obtaining an abortion. It was Mitch McConnell that said if they win the Senate and regain the White House, that they will potentially introduce a national ban on abortion. So a lot of women are quite fired up because there is this sense of awareness, it's become too much to ignore for a lot of people, that we are becoming second-class citizens. And it's not just something you can dismiss as being only in red states. It is evident that this trajectory is escalating towards removing legal protections from women across the United States, that doctors even in blue governed states may be more reluctant to perform abortions because they might fear prosecution, because Republican legislatures in red states are crafting extradition orders to try and prosecute, say, a Massachusetts doctor for performing an abortion on a Texan woman, because then you're aborting or taking the life of a Texan citizen. Because granting legal status to embryos, to zygotes, to fetuses, to unborn babies detracts and undermines the legal status of women. So if you're a pregnant woman who gets cancer and you need chemotherapy, but doctors say, well, that could jeopardize the life of your fetus, you may no longer be eligible for medical treatment for a cancer that could potentially kill you. In Ireland, the case of Dr. Savita Halappanavar motivated a lot of Irish people to vote in a referendum to allow abortion, because she was a 31-year-old dentist pregnant with a child that she wanted to have, but that unborn child, or it was at the level of a fetus, was dying. Her body was entering sepsis, and she was denied 3 times her request for a termination. She wanted to live. She wanted to be able to have children in the future. The child that she was pregnant with was not viable, but a faint fetal heartbeat was still detected. So they did not acquiesce to her request for an abortion. And she died of a heart attack secondary to sepsis, to an infection that was consuming her from the inside out. And that tragic and unnecessary death of a beautiful, vibrant woman, open to the idea of becoming a mother, desirous of becoming a mother and procreating and successfully having a child, all her dreams and aspirations were wiped out, and her life was taken as a consequence of the anti-abortion laws and the anti-abortion dynamic in the hospital she was attending. The neighbours where SCOTUS is being protested are serving food and drinks to the protesters. That's wonderful, and I'm glad to be able to take this opportunity to say hooray for those people and boo to the civility police. I see where they're coming from. They're afraid it will alienate the middle of the United States, the people who aren't as caught up in the justice elements of this. They don't strongly feel either way, but people are afraid, if you see people protesting outside a justice's house, that will make you look like the bad guys, and that will tarnish the cause you're associated with. And I see the temptation to succumb to that line of thinking, and I advocate against it. I say no. It makes it visible, and the type of people who are peacefully protesting in candlelit vigils outside of Justice Kavanaugh's house, those people are drawing attention to a cause that Republicans are trying to deny, deflect from, to sweep under the carpet, to deceive the public about their intentions, to pretend that it's not going to be a big deal if Roe v. Wade is overturned, if federal protections are stripped from American women so that they are subject to the vagaries of what happens in different states, and which Republicans have managed to gerrymander themselves an untouchable, cemented status as dominant in their various state legislatures. Yes. So Republicans can have cultural dominance in a state, and then they can have also this artificial constructed advantage of a gerrymandered pattern of dominance as well, which means they don't even have to persuade a majority of voters. They have a strong-minded minority, and those people are very often very vocal. They've been encouraged to protest at school board meetings, and they're fed a steady diet of disinformation and brainwashing on popular television shows like Tucker Carlson that pair upsetting footage with derogatory statements about Democrats. So I saw a clip of a Tucker Carlson show, and there was a performance artist, a black performance artist with a blonde wig, and she's bashing a baby doll on the ground to make some kind of point about abortion and the necessity of having abortion. I don't even know, but that performance name is Crackhead Barney and Friends. So she just likes to do outlandish things. I don't even understand the point necessarily, but the footage, you can imagine, would be very offensive to someone who views themselves as an advocate for the unborn, to see a woman smashing a baby doll on the footpath whilst dressed in a bikini. So very underdressed, very associated with a lot of shaming stereotypes. And also she's black. So if you have a racist audience who are against abortion and like to view themselves as being protective of children, footage of that performer smashing a doll while Tucker Carlson says, this is what Democrats are doing in the Senate. So you hear the message, this is what Democrats are doing, and you see a black woman smashing a baby doll on the ground. And that is crafted to elicit an emotional response in a racist audience with a savior complex about unborn children. A fabricated savior complex, because they don't help unborn children. They vote for Republicans who undermined funding for prenatal care for women and undermined postnatal funding for care for babies, infants, for the kind of support that a functional society provides for people in their most challenging phase of their lives. Because looking after small children and looking after babies is challenging. And the more support, the better. A lot of brain development of children occurs in the years between 0 to 5. And that is when societies should extend a helping hand, which is the exact opposite of Republican prosperity gospel ideology, which says no help, unless you're a wealthy person who's managed to pay a Republican candidate enough to support subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, etc. Then you can soft cushion for the wealthy, for everybody else, a stern talking to and a closed door. No help. That's all from me for today. Thank you for listening to anybody who's invested the time and energy to engage with my opinions and my thoughts. I've had Amber Heard up on screen the whole time, but I did want to celebrate something, which is that Democrats today have been able to confirm a new member, Alvaro Bedoya, so that Democrats now have a majority on the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, to protect consumers and to crack down on big oil price gouging. So all the Republicans voted against that appointment. Yes, civil bipartisanship is, the hood is off from Republicans in respect to that. But relating to big oil, this is the profit that the various big oil companies were able to generate in the last quarter. Shell, 9.1 billion, Chevron, 6.3 billion, BP, 6.2 billion, Exxon, 5.4 billion. And this is information from Sherrod Brown, who is a senator. Let me make that just really big so people can see. He asserts that they're not raising prices to cover their costs. They're raising prices to pad their profits. And somebody makes the important point that they are doing this in a way to influence an election, that they are trying to sabotage Democrats in the polling booth. They're trying to disincentivize the American public for voting for Democrats by inflating prices to make people feel hostile towards the political party currently in office. So that's an important point that I would like to make about that. Good that the composition of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is changing, so perhaps Democrats can do something to limit this Republican pandering price inflation tendencies meant and orchestrated to deter people from voting for Democrats, so that they get more politicians in office who will consent to subsidizing their industries and taking funding away, the kind of subsidies you need to get the renewable energy industry more off the ground and more into a dominant position in the American energy market. Bob is talking about a famous right to privacy case in the town you were born, Morriston, NJ. Karen Ann Quinlan. It had to do with life support while she was in a coma. The parent eventually won and she was disconnected. And that's a bit of a pattern, isn't it? Republican advocacy for people who can just pretend they agree with what you want. They can pretend that an unborn fetus wants to be born into a world in which their parent doesn't want them and was coerced into continuing the pregnancy. They can pretend that that fetus will be like, hooray, this was my only chance to exist. We need so much more talking around the idea of if your parent has an abortion, then you can't go back in time and say, no, but I wouldn't have been born. You would have been someone else. This is very metaphysically confusing to talk about, but you have your thoughts and your cognition because you were born, because your parent didn't have a successful abortion. So there's no point time traveling and saying I'm anti-abortion because I owe my existence to my parents' choice. At least they voluntarily made that choice. If your parent had been coerced into not having an abortion, then maybe you would have had such a horrible life that you would have been not able to be currently out here with the confidence to give your opinion on reproductive choice, on whether you're for or against it. So thanks for making that point about that 1975 case, Bob. It's lovely to see you and to interact with you today. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And please feel free to contact me through social media. If you have a topic that you think I should discuss, or you have some history that you think I would benefit from knowing, and some arguments that you think the public would be well served by me sharing those arguments. So I'm running with the theme of clash of the competing realities, because every day we always have to try and sort through what is disinformation and what is real information that citizens need to be aware of, what are real patterns of political behavior from Republicans and Democrats, and a lot of the what I would call the dirtbag left or the far left that often at the moment are engaged in voter suppression tactics of trying to discourage people from voting for Democrats by holding them to absurdly high standards, given the context of American political composition, that there's the Electoral College, that there's gerrymandering, that there's Senate malapportionment that is contrived, that is orchestrated to put more power in the hands of white conservatives and a white conservative agenda, and gives them more power to obstruct and prevent positive legislation from being passed, which means it's all the more wonderful when Democrats do achieve anything. And if you want more of it, you have to vote for Democrats rather than saying, no, I'm going to withhold my vote to evince my displeasure with Democrats for not doing enough. Like, that is not okay. Do not evince your displeasure. Do not think you're so important that you should withhold support from the only party that stands between us and an autocratic Christian autocracy that resembles the book version of The Handmaid's Tale. Because in the book version, minorities are enslaved and killed in a mass genocide, whereas in the TV version, they wanted to include black faces on screen, so they have some black characters. But in the book, that would not be the case because minorities were sent away to slave plantations if they escaped being killed outright. So that's an important point to make about The Handmaid's Tale, which depicts a future that doesn't seem too distant, in which women are vehicles for men to conceive children. So thanks, Bob. Thanks, anybody who watched. Take care. Thank you to any replay viewers. All the best. Chat soon. Take care of yourselves, your planet, each other, all of the things. Wear an N95 mask if you can't avoid being in a crowded indoor space, because COVID is airborne and it's still there. And even if you're vaccinated, you want to avoid repeat infections. You want to reduce your chance of getting long COVID, which I hear is unpleasant, and I can imagine would be potentially debilitating to your employment and ability to conduct yourself at a personal level, an employment, or an educational level. So avoid multiple COVID infections by masking with a well-fitting mask and avoiding indoor events that you can avoid.